if you want to watch some portraits from this period, you may recall we talked about portraitists in the previous styles. Then I would like to interest you in the works of two actually foreign artists who came to Britain and made very good careers in Britain as portraitists. One was a Hungarian artist, Philip de Laszlo, who portrayed women in the Edwardian period. So here you have some examples of his works. The other one was an American, John Singer Sargent. He also moved to Britain and had a very good career portraying beautiful ladies of the turn of the century. And basically, if you look at these portraits, these are mostly rich ladies, those who could afford the current fashions, and they all look alluring and mysterious and slightly provocative, but only very slightly. That's really the best of turn of the century portraiture that you can find. If we look at the fashion plates from the Edwardian period, so 1901 to 1910 more or less, the first thing you notice is a very characteristic posture of the women portrayed in the fashion plates, which is called the S bend. This is I would say the continuation of the Grecian bend, popular in the Bustle period, achieved by the same means. So a very stiff front of the corset, long stiff front of the corset. So if you look at the fashion plate, sometimes it's quite exaggerated. You have the very pronounced breasts, then a small waist, which is kind of pushed backwards a little, and then again another curve of the buttocks. However, there are some changes, there are some new inventions. For example, something that is sometimes called a monobreast or a chicken breast, so kind of positioning of a woman which pushes the bosom very strongly forward and kind of flattens the front, so that the breasts have like a single curvature and not two separate curves. Generally, what we have in many fashion plates from this period is the long waist, so a waist that is sometimes even slightly lower than the natural place, especially at the front of the garment, and especially if it is worn with a blouse. So the fashionable way to wear a blouse with a skirt and jacket was to fit the blouse a bit more loosely at the front of the waist than at the back of it. This creates an effect which is sometimes called a pouch effect, so that the front of the figure is emphasized. It looks quite comfortable. It creates this kind of illusion of comfort. But of course, these things were worn over the the corset, so it's just an illusion. You don't really have any more comfort in this arrangement than you would with tightly fitted or tightly tucked blouse. But the popularity of this really shows the changing ideal rather than the reality. So at the Edwardian period we have those different versions of tailor-made costumes or suits, female suits made of matching skirts and jackets in what usually, traditionally, was sometimes called the masculine materials. That is the woolen cloth. What you have, of course, are the upgraded feminine versions. Note the emphasis attached to the bottom of the skirt, so the hem decorations, you could have rows of small flounces or just this kind of flaring shape, which is achieved by those fancy petticoats with the small flounces, so you sometimes do not see them, but you could see the effects of them in the shape of the garment. Sometimes, although quite rarely, there is some gathering at the back, like here in this fashion plate. It's perhaps the reminiscence of the bustle, but the bustle itself will never be back in fashion. High collars everywhere, and elaborate decorative hats for daytime. Sometimes if the lady was not particularly in favor of these things, but most were, they might replace them with a sensible, almost masculine looking hat. Like here we have a very simple tailor-made costume worn with what looks really like a male fedora hat that was quite popular at this time of the early 20th century. So these were options for perhaps more serious ladies, more the ladies who could not achieve this kind of hourglass figure or didn't care for it as much. Also perhaps for pregnant ladies. We haven't talked about it at all, and we will probably talk about it some more when we talk about clothes for special occasions like weddings or funerals. But note that throughout the 19th century there is no notion of maternity clothes. But these women were getting pregnant all the time, so they had to wear something. Perhaps this version of a simple tailor-made costume without the accentuated waist, which is very rare, could serve this purpose as well. So here we have the day clothes, and for evening, similar shape of the skirt, so the tulip shape with those surface decorations, the applications mostly in the designs resembling plants and vines and flowers, sometimes with a bit of exotic look, perhaps Spanish like in this case, but generally the shape is the same. So as you can see by the beginning of the 20th century, the puffy sleeves are going out of fashion, and they are replaced by relatively simple sleeves, sometimes with a bit of adornment at the top or perhaps a bit of flaring at the wrist, but the puffs go out. Sometimes you have in the first years of the 20th century a similar thing happening to the sleeves as in the late Romantic style. So the fullness goes from the top of the shoulder, so the leg of Maton style, lower down the arm. You have some decoration around the elbows and then closer to the wrists. So if you look at the fashion plates from, let's say, 1903, it would be something happening, something decorative happening around the elbows. And then here we have a fashion plate from 1905 with very pronounced puffiness of the sleeve just above the wrist, just above the cuff. So the same principles that governed the descent of the fullness of the sleeve in the late Romantic styles. So later the simple narrow sleeves with no decoration replace the accentuated shoulders or anything really happening to the sleeves. This is the period in which the hats really become very important. So all these fashion plates and portraits, well, some of the portraits that feature day dresses, they have a lot of beautiful, extravagant, individualistic hats. They are really very, very important, and you wouldn't leave home without them. You could have, for example, hats made of straw and artificial flowers that were popular in the summer, or something made of felt and even with fur decorations or feathers for the winter, but you wouldn't leave home without them. The last phase of the Edwardian period really focuses on the hats even more. Perhaps even at the expense of focusing on dresses at all. So the fashion plates show very sensible tailor-made costumes for the day. So a very simple set of a skirt and a matching jacket. Worn over a corset, of course, sometimes with decorations like fur trimmings or fur muffs, but the attraction of this costume is really in good quality of the fabric and good quality of the craftsmanship, if you could afford it. So if you could still afford to have your clothes made to measure. But increasingly, these clothes are available ready-made. So it's easier to fit a skirt and a jacket than a full dress. So now you can go to a department store and buy ready-made clothes. So if you look at the fashion plates from 1908, 1910, simple, relatively unadorned clothes for daytime. This is like this suffragette uniform, which I mentioned already. But the focus of attention and the point of fashion here are the hats. They are bigger than ever. They can be actually wider in the circumference of the brim than the hem of the skirt. And they could be worn for evening as well. So here we have from 1901 two versions of evening dresses, or perhaps dinner dresses, which are very narrow. They are again kind of tubular, with narrow skirts, with short trains, but nothing really happening to the tailoring, to the structure. But they are matched with enormous broad hats with lots of trimming. lots of feathers in this case, and these hats really become the focus of the end of the Edwardian period, and they continue until the outbreak of the First World War, for day and even for the evening. So if you look at some photographs here, and the last portrait by Philip de Laszlo, you can see women wearing simple clothes, simple tailor-made costumes, and those huge decorative hats with feathers. The last image shows again an evening dress, narrow. Sometimes this kind of dresses would be called the eel dress, after this long and narrow fish. But the focus of attention, the fashionable accessory, is the huge hat with the feathers. And this situation continues until the outbreak of the First World War. After the war, the fashions will be completely changed. Women will stop wearing corsets for the first time. Youth and innocence, and maybe not innocence, but this kind of flirtatiousness will be back in fashion. Women will start suntanning for the first time in history, probably, and we will really have the modern age with the modern women and modern fashions. So that's the end of our short overview of styles in the long 19th century. Of course, we focused mostly on the women. Next week we will talk only about the men. For the entire episode, it probably will be slightly longer, so yeah, we'll cover all the 5 styles and see how the men's fashion followed the same principle as female fashion, with all the social and even political differences. So remember to look for some films set in the Belle Epoque. It shouldn't be very difficult. It's a very picturesque period with a lot of interesting movie materials, and we'll talk about them when we have the light.